9 hikers walked into the Ural Mountains in February 1959. Only their tent came back intact, and it had been sliced open from the inside. Outside, footprints in socks, barefoot, one person in a single shoe, led away from camp and down into a snowstorm at -25 degrees Celsius. Weeks later, searchers found the bodies. Some looked almost peaceful. Others had crushed ribs, a fractured skull, and one woman was missing her tongue and eyes, with no cuts to explain it. Soviet investigators closed the case, citing a compelling unknown force, and sealed the files for decades. Theories ranged from secret weapons tests to infrasound panic to Yeti attacks. For 60 years, nobody could explain how 9 experienced skiers cut open their own tent and ran into a blizzard without shoes toward their deaths. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what happened up there and why it took physicists using avalanche models 60 years to prove it. Igor Dyatlov was 23, an engineering student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute, leading 9 friends on a grueling ski trek to Oturtan Mountain, a category Roman 3 route, the hardest ranking in Soviet mountaineering. The team included 7 men and 2 women, all seasoned outdoors people. On January 27th, one member, Ural, turned back with a knee injury. That decision saved his life. He lived until 2013. The remaining 9 pressed on through waist-deep snow. On the evening of February 1st, they made a choice investigators still argue about. Instead of descending to the tree line for shelter, they pitched their tent directly on the exposed slope of a mountain the local Mansi people called Kalat Sidak, which translates, unsettlingly, to Dead Mountain. Diary entries from that final day describe fatigue but ordinary morale. Nothing suggested what was coming within hours. Sometime after nightfall, something made 9 people slash their own tent open from the inside and flee. Investigators found the canvas cut in multiple places, not near the entrance. Footprint trails in the snow showed the group moving together, not scattering in panic, down toward a tree line over a kilometer away. Near a large cedar tree, searchers found the remains of a small fire and the first 2 bodies, Yuri Krivonishenko and Yuri Doroshenko, dressed only in underwear despite the brutal cold. Broken branches high on the cedar suggested someone had climbed it, perhaps to look back at the tent. 3 more bodies were found between the tree and the camp, apparently trying to return for warmer clothes. It took investigators until May, 3 months later, to find the final 4, buried under 4 meters of snow in a ravine further down the slope. Those final 4 bodies are why this case never faded away. Nicholas Thibox-Prignolul had a fractured skull. Lyudmila Dubinina and Semen Zolotaryov both had catastrophic chest fractures, the kind of force usually seen in car crashes, yet none of them had any external wounds, bruising, or broken skin. Dubinina was also missing her tongue, eyes, and part of her lips. Some clothing tested positive for elevated radioactive contamination. The Soviet inquest, dated May 28, 1959, ruled the deaths were caused by a compelling natural force and refused to elaborate. The files were classified. In a closed Soviet state, where the KGB monitored its own citizens, that silence practically guaranteed decades of speculation about military cover-ups, secret weapons tests, or something far stranger. For 60 years, the vacuum of evidence got filled with everything imaginable. Some pointed to nearby Soviet weapons testing, arguing the radiation and crushing injuries fit an explosion. Others proposed infrasound low-frequency wind vibrations off the mountain's shape that can trigger panic and nausea without ever being heard. Cryptid hunters blamed a Yeti, citing a blurry shape in the trees on the group's own camera roll. Documentary shows built entire episodes on the mystery. It became serious enough that in 2019, 60 years after the deaths, Russian authorities officially reopened the investigation. Prosecutors tested 3 explanations: a criminal act, a standard avalanche, and a slab collapse. What they, and independent scientists working separately, eventually converged on had been dismissed decades earlier for one simple reason: the slope looked far too gentle for any avalanche. In 2021, 2 scientists, Johann Galm of Switzerland's EPFL and Alexander Puzrin, published a model that finally made the physics work. Their answer was a slab avalanche, but a delayed, unusual one. The hikers had cut into the slope to level their tent, which is normally safe on a gentle incline. But that cut, combined with strong winds packing snow into a dense slab above the camp, created hidden stress. Hours later, that slab released without warning, sliding a short distance and slamming into the sleeping hikers with tremendous localized force enough to crush ribs and skulls without bruising skin, much like injuries seen in car accidents where a seatbelt spreads the force internally. Disoriented and possibly concussed, the survivors cut the tent open and fled toward the trees for shelter, then died of hypothermia in the storm. That still leaves loose threads, and honest science admits it. The radiation likely came from Zolotaryov and Krivonishenko's prior work with contaminated equipment at a nuclear facility, not an explosion. The missing tongue and eyes, once treated as evidence of an attack, match a grim but mundane process. Bodies submerged in spring meltwater for months are scavenged by small animals, and decomposition removes soft tissue first. The shape in the tree's photo has never been conclusively identified, but was the last frame on an exposed roll, more likely a camera malfunction than a creature. None of it required weapons, conspiracies, or monsters. It required one specific slope angle, one wind pattern, and hikers making an ordinary camping choice on a night when conditions turned lethal within hours. The real horror of Dyatlov Pass was never a cover-up. It was how quietly inexplainable it turned out to be. 9 capable, careful people made one unremarkable decision, cutting a flat ledge into a snow slope, and that single choice, amplified by wind and geometry, ended 9 lives within hours. It took scientists over 60 years, avalanche data, and a mathematical model borrowed from car crash safety testing to prove that nature alone was terrifying enough. No sabotage, no secret weapon, no creature in the trees. Just physics, patient and indifferent, waiting on a mountain the Mansi people had already warned everyone not to climb. Somewhere in the Urals, that slope still stands exactly as it did in 1959, proof that the scariest explanations are sometimes the simplest ones. Subscribe for more stories like this.